Hello and welcome back to another video. Today I have something very exciting planned for us. We're going to be making a MEGARA cosplay. I am so excited about this because Hercules is actually probably, I'm gonna say it's my favorite Disney movie. Yeah, I'm obsessed with this film. I watch it a lot and I love Meg. She's so sassy. When this movie first came out and I was little, and I remember just being in awe of her because she was designed with all of this sass and all of this I don't really need you to save me, I'm doing just fine on my own. I loved that, and I just love this movie. I love the music, I really love the design, I love Hades, he's so funny. My dog's name is Zeus and it's largely because of this movie, so I'm a big fan. Anyway, I've got some fabric here to show you. This is going to be our main body. This is the Minerva Core Range two-tone shot taffeta, and this is the color mauve. On camera it looks a bit more like lavender, but in real life you have this kind of gray in one angle and then a bit more of a mauvey pink in the other angle. So because it's two-tone, you, depending on the lighting and kind of which way you're looking at it, it has a bit of a different color to it, which is really fun. Then I have this satin, which again, it's a little bit lighter than I thought it was going to be. I thought it was going to be a little bit darker in real life, but it will be fine. And this is going to be for her details. So the shoulders, straps, I guess, are from a darker fabric. It has that very Greek vibe to it, but also clearly an empire waistline, which is where there's a bit of this kind of darker purple, and then there's also a sash at the hip, which again, same purple, but she has these little I don't even know what they're called, but they look like pins that have that really typical Hercules movie circle. So she has two at the shoulder and one at the hip. So I am going to be making some pins. To start the pins, I grabbed some lavender felt from my stash and drew some circles using a template, which in this case was my camera lens cap, just to make sure that they were all uniform. I'm going to be completely filling in this felt, but in the event that some of it is visible, it will match the dress. I originally planned on beading this, so I was going to cover the whole thing with beads in the circular shape of the pin. However, at the halfway mark of the first pin, I realized that I didn't like how it looked. It was too bulky for one, but also the beads were a little darker than the films seemed to be. Plus, getting them all to lay perfectly aligned was getting very difficult and very frustrating. And yes, I am watching Hercules while I do this. So then I gave some gold embroidery thread that I had at my stash a go, and I liked that much, much better. It was much more shiny and read a lot more gold on camera, which was obviously the point of this. Once I had a game plan for my pins, I switched gears to the dress. I laid out my fabric, got my pattern pieces out, and started puzzling out the cutting layout. For those of you who want to see my pattern organization system, by the way, I have started working on a video on that, and it should be up around January. For this dress, I am going to be doing a bit of a pattern mashup. For the top, I'm using the Sweetheart bodice from Gertie's Ultimate Dress Book, which you've seen me use a few times before. And for the skirt, I'm using the Butterick 6018. This is a reproduction of an original 1950s pattern, so it's perfectly on brand for this dress. The original Butterick dress has a raised waistline, but I am going to be cutting my skirt pieces at the natural waistline so it matches up with the bodice. I loved the princess seams of both the bodice and the skirt, and I think they're a perfect nod to Meg's dress, which has a ton of lines running down along it. I've got everything ready to sew, so that's exciting. I need to check if I have enough zip ties for the boning. I had exactly enough zip ties for the boning, which was very exciting for me. And while I have this box out, I also went ahead and picked out a zipper for the back of the dress. I'm lining the bodice with the same taffeta, so I went ahead and sewed two versions of it. As always, I'm going to be doing some batch sewing to make things go a little quicker, but today I decided to do the whole bodice and then make the whole skirt because I hadn't yet decided how I was going to tackle finishing the seams on the skirt, and I was procrastinating making a decision. For sewing with taffeta, I recommend you use either a 70 or 80 size needle, but a brand new one because a dull needle could totally ruin taffeta. Plus, this is very much a measure twice and sew once kind of fabric, so I had to really think about what I was doing while I was working with this. When I had both my bodices made up, it was time to make the boning channels. But before I could do this, I wanted to cut out my straps so that I could assess how much fabric I had left to make by it. So using my strap measurement for this bodice, I cut out 4 strips of fabric and stitched them together along the long edges. Then I set about turning them inside out, which was a whole thing, but it did get done in the end. Then I could focus on my bias and sew it to the outer part of the bodice. To do this, I cut it to size and then I stitch it to the seam allowance down both sides. This means my boning channels are secure, but my stitches are not visible on the garment. When I've sewn them all down, I also like to add a quick basting stitch along the bottom of the channels in the seam allowance so that I can add my boning without worrying about it falling out. To add the zip ties, I measure how long each one of them needs to be to fit in their channel and cut it down to size with regular scissors. I like using zip ties because they're super easy to use, they're cheap and accessible, and provide a really good amount of structure without limiting my movement or making me feel uncomfortable. I also take the time to file them down so that they're smooth and won't poke me or ruin my fabric. Once all the zip ties are in place, I throw in another basting stitch along the top of the channels in the seam allowance to avoid them slipping out. Sadly, I cannot find footage of that as I was having some trouble with my sewing machine when I made this and probably got very frustrated and turned it off the camera. Anyway, after all the zip ties are securely in place, I went ahead and stitched the bodice to the lining along the top and made sure to sandwich my straps in at this point too. It also made sure not to sew over the zip ties. I clipped the curves of the bodice and pressed it, and then I added some understitching to keep the lining in place.
Hello. So, update time. We have the bodice pretty much done. I need to sew in my tag because I forgot to do that the other day.
So that's going really well. I'm happy with that. I did get very close to running out of thread, so I had to run to the store to get some more. However, I have run into a problem with the little embroidery situation. I'm really happy with how it looks. I think it looks really pretty. I love the texture. I'm literally just using a backstitch. So even though it's annoying to work with this thread, it looks beautiful, right? This is all I have left of this thread. Today is Wednesday. The lady at the store that like my haberdashery where I usually buy these things is sold out. She has ordered some, but they are sold out to whoever she orders it from. So she's hoping that on Monday she'll have some. I don't know of any other haberdasheries in my area that aren't like super far away, so I'm gonna have to think about it. I went to another store, like a general store that also has like craft materials and stuff. I had a look around and in a panic I bought some metallic like gold fabric paint because I thought I don't know, I thought I would give it a go. I would give it a try. I mixed a little bit of gold with brown to do the detail and like shading and stuff. Because this is paint, obviously it would need some like more texture and detailing and stuff, but I'm not sure. My partner says that this is a hard no and he thinks that I should go with the embroidery. I don't know. I'm gonna have to think about this. I don't know. So after that disastrous turn of events, I procrastinated making a decision by working on the skirt. The skirt is very easy to put together, so I stitched down the pockets, sewed all the side seams, and finished them on my serger, and then I pressed them. With my skirt complete, I attached it to the bodice, which brought about another challenge. I had never actually put these two patterns together before, and it turns out that the princess seams did not perfectly align in reality as they did in my mind. I also had more bodice than skirt, so I decided to make a small tuck at the front of the bodice so that my lines would align, and if there was any excess fabric at the back, I could deal with it when I attached the zipper. Okay, so crisis sort of averted. I probably should have made a mock-up. I put this little tuck in at the front I think it's one of those things that because I am very aware of it because I just made it and I know that it's like a defect, I'm going to be a little bit more self-conscious about it. I don't think it's that noticeable in reality, and honestly, I am just gonna roll with it. I think it looks decent. It's not the most perfect thing ever, but I think it looks fine. I am gonna be wearing this with a sash whenever I wear it as a cosplay, and I just decided as I was doing this that I'm gonna make a little belt to match this with this fabric so that I can always just hide it. Yeah, we're gonna keep rolling. I did stitch this with a longer stitch so it'd be easier to unpick, and I am gonna unpick it and do it again because in the kind of haste of like I really need to see this put together and on my body, I did not a very good job. Let's do it. We can do it. We can do it, team. We can do it. For the zipper, I pressed it open first, which makes it a lot easier to sew close to the zipper teeth, and then I stitched it down using my zipper foot. When the zipper was in place, I closed the center back seam and pressed it open. This meant I could finally pin the lining in place along the waistline and the zipper, folding the seam allowances in so that I could actually stitch it down by hand later. Then I dug into my belt buckle stash because apparently I'm some kind of hoarder who has a belt buckle stash, and I found the perfect one for this dress. And fun fact, these are all vintage. To make the belt, I took some measurements, did some inaccurate math, interfaced my belt fabric piece, and stitched it into a tube. Then I moved on to making the bias for the hem using my leftover fabric. From experience with this skirt, I knew that the hem wouldn't really drop, so I went ahead and evened it out and attached the bias with right sides together. On some of the excess of the belt, I've been testing out my buttonholes. I used an awl to make the first hole, and then with my scissors, so I'm just trying to like widen this little puncture with my scissors. I'm using the thread doubled so it's a little bit faster, and then I just stitch around to kind of finish that raw edge. I'm actually going to be putting my belt through like that. So this is what it's gonna look like, but this pointy bit is gonna be in the middle. And then I'm just gonna stitch this down to the actual to itself so that it doesn't go anywhere. To finish the hem, I have to sew the bias to the inside of the dress by hand, trying to make those stitches as invisible as possible, which is quite difficult in fabric like taffeta. With my dress complete, I had to finally tackle the sash and removable straps in the contrasting purple satin. I started by sort of draping them to help me visualize what I wanted. And please don't be jealous of my amazing outfit. I know not everyone can rock the Harry Potter PJ bottoms with a Christmas sweater, but I am one of the lucky few who can. But seriously, once I decided what I wanted, I took some measurements and wrote them down, and I went back to my desk. I did some more math, and in case you were wondering, no, I did not get it right on the first try, and I'm not really sure I got it right at all, but I made it work. So, my idea was to cut out 4 strips, 4 straps, the same length as my straps plus seam allowance, and quite a bit wider than the originals to get them to gather into looking like Megs. Then for the sash, I literally just wanted a long and wide kind of belt that I could tie around my waist. I stitched the rectangles together into 3 tubes, 2 shorter ones for straps and 1 the full width of the fabric for the sash, and then I turned them right side out and pressed. Then I just tucked the raw edges in and closed the seams by hand. So now I need to gather the straps and add some kind of mechanism to be able to attach them to the dress temporarily. So I stitched a reinforcement piece of the same satin fabric and the same size as the straps on the dress to each tip of the satin strap, making sure to gather the satin strap into the right size. And then I sewed a pin back to each end of each strap so I can easily add them or remove them whenever I want. After putting the purple straps on the dress, I realized the fabric wasn't gathering as much as I had hoped, and I decided to stitch the gatherers I wanted down along the purple strap. In order to do this, I went back to draping to manipulate the fabric into the shape I wanted and pinning it in place, and then I stitched it all down by hand and gave it a really good press so that it would lay flat. Now onto the pins. I finally finished the gold embroidery, and I added a little shading with a darker color to make mine a bit more similar to the pins on Meg's dress. Then I cut the pin out, leaving a bit of seam allowance, and I cut that seam allowance into tabs, getting as close as possible to the stitching without actually clipping the stitches. Next, I turned the tabs to the back of the pin and stitched them down. You can skip this and go straight to the next step, but I find it's a lot less fiddly this way. I can then cut out another circle slightly smaller than the pin to use as backing. I usually just use the same template, but trim it down. When I'm happy with the size of the backing, I pin it down and mark where I want the pin back to go. Then I cut out a couple of slits to fit the pointy pin back and the fastener so that the bar of the pin back gets tucked behind the felt. This makes it way prettier and so much more secure. And then I can go ahead and just stitch the backing to the pin. So after I repeat that 2 more times, it's time for the reveal. Well, there we have it. That's our reveal. I'm really excited about it. I love this dress. I think it's beautiful. Let me know, what you thought about the project. What's your favorite Disney movie? If you would like to, you could also consider following me specifically on Instagram. I'm really close to getting to 1,000 followers on there, and that would be a cool goal for me to complete before the end of the year. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!